welcome to today's Bitrix24 webinar, Better Business Processes. Thank you for joining today. Okay, so we'll just go through some introductions. So my name is Sam Connor. I'm a sales engineer here at Bitrix24 Gold Partners Interface. We're based in the UK, the US and Hong Kong, and we offer a full range of services to help you with Bitrix24. Starting off with pre-sale support, so we can discuss your requirements in detail and really evaluate if Bitrix could be a good fit for your business. We can implement a system for you to manage your specific requirements. If you're looking at a self-hosted edition, we offer our own hosting services, and we can provide training and ongoing dedicated support to really help you get the most out of Bitrix. Okay, so first of all, just to go through what Bitrix24 is. So Bitrix24 is a collaboration suite of in excess of 35 different tools that you can use to manage your business. And there are over 10 million customers now around the world using Bitrix24. And the system is available in two different editions. We have the Bitrix Cloud and we have the Bitrix self-hosted solution. And prices start from $49 per month for a cloud-based edition and $2,990 for a lifetime self-hosted license. Okay, so today's webinar is all about business processes, how we can manage our processes in Bitrix24 using the business process designer tools. So first of all, it's really important to understand what are business processes. Okay, so a business process is a flow of information defined by either a route or a scheme. Okay, and there are different types of business processes that you can run in Bitrix24. So first of all, let's just go through and have a look at the different types of business processes that we can run. Okay, so first of all, what we can run is a sequential business process. Okay, so let's just now go through here and we can open up the sequential business process. Okay, so here we can see that sequential business process. So this type of business process will perform a series of consecutive actions on an item from a predefined start point. So we can see here at the top we've got the start points, and we can then see the flow here for this particular process. And then that process will continue until we get to a predefined endpoint that we can see here. And later on we'll be going through and creating a sequential business process in more detail. The second type of process is a state-driven business process. So really the key difference here in a state-driven business process is that there is no start or end point. It is a series of statuses, and on each status there are child processes that are triggered. So for example here at the draft status we are sending for approval and then to publish. And you can see here we have the different statuses, approval and publishing for example. And then the third type of process is using automation rules. Now this could be either in the CRM or it could be in the robotic process automation tool. But with automations, what we can then do is we can create actions which are triggered based on what stage the process is at. So for example here in the leads database, here are our different stages for a lead. And what we have done here is we have set up different automation rules to take place as the lead hits those different stages inside the system. So for example here you can see that at the new lead stage we're sending out a thank you email to the lead, and it's dynamically populated with their information. So that can be automated using the automation rules. Okay, so that is a look at the three different types of business processes. So we've just seen there the sequential, state-driven and the CRM automation and robotic process automation tools. Okay, so let's have a look at how processes are actually managed now. So what we can see here now is how we can actually run those different business processes. So they can be created and they can be triggered in quite a few different areas of the Bitrix24 system. So first of all, we can run business processes in the HR and admin section. So in the feed area, we can run different types of processes such as leave requests and expenses. We can run them in the CRM system. So you can run a business process really on any entity within the CRM, such as leads, deals, contacts, and companies. And we'll also see how we can run automations inside leads and deals later on. We can run processes on documents, so we can automatically or manually trigger those, such as an approval of a document, for example. Then we also have lists, so lists are very common inside a project, so you can store tables of information. For example, it could be expenses on a project. And from there, what we can then do is we could send an expense for approval directly inside the work group. Okay, we can run automations on processes inside tasks based on what stage the task is at. And with the self-hosted system, it is possible to run processes on different areas compared to the cloud. So for example, it could be on a user's profile page, for example. Okay, so let's now go into the Bitrix system and just let's have a look at some of those areas in more detail. Okay, so let's go to the home section here. So in the activity stream, the first area we could run a process from here is if we click on the more button there, then what we can do is we can click on the workflow button. And from here, for example, if I wanted to run the request leave workflow, I can select that form and now it opens up the request leave form, and I can now start to input all of my information to trigger that business process. Okay, and let's go into the CRM system. So we mentioned how we can trigger a business process in leads, deals, contacts, and companies. So let's go into a company, for example. Then inside the company page, what we can do in the top right-hand corner here, we can see all of the business processes associated to the company entity, and I can then run one of those manually here. Now, later on we will be creating a business process, and we'll see the different ways we can actually trigger that business process. So what we are showing here is how you can manually trigger that process, but it is also possible to automatically trigger a business process based on a condition. So it could be, for example, if the field gets updated with a certain value, for example, we could then trigger that workflow. Okay, so moving on, let's go into the drive module. So we've mentioned how we can create and run business processes on documents. So inside the drive area here, first of all, just make sure that we have turned on the configure business processes button. So if you've got that turned off, then you won't be able to run the business processes on documents. So just make sure you have ticked the button there. Okay, and then we can see the selection here of business processes that we can run. Now, this is really where you would see some of those state-driven business processes that we mentioned at the start of today's webinar. So here we can see that state-driven process based on the status here, and we then have child actions underneath. So that's where we can then run those processes inside the drive module. So in terms of automation, we've mentioned inside the CRM system, and also with the robotic process automation tool, we can run automations. So here we can see the automations inside the CRM system. So here, based on what stage the lead is at, we can then trigger different actions. So for example, here we've got a task to get back in contact with the lead at the checking back in stage. And within here, we can also, if I just show you the different types of automation, so it can be automations for your internal teams, but it can also be client communications if you wanted to automate maybe an email communication, for example. And within the automation section, we can also run triggers. So it could be, for example, that you have sent an email to a lead, and with that email there is a link that the lead could click. Now if they click on that link, then what we could do is we could automatically move them to the looking good stage using a trigger, because a trigger can then automatically update the stage that that lead or really whatever type of process you have implemented is using. So if they click on that link on the email, then really we think they're engaging with us, they're proactively getting in touch, so we can move them to the looking good stage. Okay, let's go into work groups. So we've mentioned the feature on lists, so let's just have a look at lists inside a project. So here we're inside one of our projects and we have the list section. So inside here what we can do is really its ability to store tables of information. So for example, we can see here we have the expenses that are associated to this particular project. So inside here we can see all of those different expenses, and what we can also see is maybe all of those that are currently pending. So we can see those in the system. So these expenses have not yet been approved. So what we could do is we could then run the approval business process, and that would now go to the project manager to either approve or to reject that expense in the system. And inside here we can configure those workflows. So you can create your own processes which you can then store inside the lists. So this expense workflow that we have inside this project, here is the workflow. So you can see here this is a sequential business process because we have a start point and then we have an end point. So we can see we create the expense and then we have the decision to be made here. So we either approve or we reject the expense. And if it's rejected, we've then set up a separate action here so the user is notified that the expense has been rejected. Okay, so that's a look at a few of the different areas where we can run those business processes directly inside the Bitrix24 system. Now, quite a new feature, if we just go back into the CRM, you can also now run automations on smart process automations. So this is quite a new feature that Bitrix24 have released. So inside here, what you're able to do is essentially you can build your own unique entities inside the CRM system. So it could be, for example, an onboarding process for customers, for example. Or inside here we have some workshops that we could maybe associate to our contacts. And inside those smart processes, for every type of smart process you create, you also have access to the automation features, like you can see inside leads and deals. So you can set up automation rules on every type of SPA that you create. So essentially here you can create your own entities inside the CRM, and we can use the automation functionality to automate actions and processes as you progress a record through that unique entity. That's quite a new feature that Bitrix24 have released. And if you have any questions as we're going through today's webinar, please do put them into the question box on YouTube and we can answer those for you during the intervals of today's webinar. Okay, so in the next section we're going to be looking at actually creating our own business processes inside Bitrix24. Okay, so we just had a question actually come through. Can permissions be assigned on those automations? Okay, so I assume by the permission section you want to check that only certain people can create those automations. So yes, you can do this. So if we just go back into the CRM system, and if we go into the settings, then we have an area here called permissions. And if we click on the permissions section, what we can do inside here is for every role in the system, we can set a unique permission structure. So for example, if we go into the CRM section, for example, what we can do inside here is we can access or deny access to different areas of the system. So this can include, for example, the administrators who can then access and edit automation. So we have the automation feature here. So you can decide who has the ability to update and create the automation rules inside the CRM area of Bitrix24. Okay, so now let's actually have a look at how we can create business processes inside the system. Okay, so Bitrix24 includes a very advanced editor tool for building business processes. So it uses simple drag and drop technology and includes over 40 pre-built action blocks that you can use to build out your own business process. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build a business process inside the deals section of the CRM system. So based on what stage we're at, we're going to create different actions that we can run. So let's go back into our Bitrix system and let's go into the CRM. Okay, so when we want to create a new business process in the CRM, where we can go to is in the settings, and let's go to the automation area, and then we can go to the business process button here. Okay, and then from here what we can do is we can select which entity we want to add the business process to, so we can see those different entities such as lead, contact, company, etc. So let's add a new template into here. Okay, so here first of all we just need to give the workflow a title and a description so we can actually detail exactly what the workflow is about. Okay, so we're doing this process when a deal stage is actually at a certain area or if it gets changed. So let's call this deal stage change process. Okay, and what you could also do from here is you could add a description if you wanted to. And then we can choose when we want this to actually run. So when do we want this workflow and process to be triggered? So for example, we can do it when the deal is added, or we can do it when the deal is changed, or we could leave those empty and just have it run manually inside the system. But what we want to do is actually run this when a change happens on the deal, so we can see where the stage is at for that particular deal. So let's now save that. Okay, and hopefully you'll remember that the type of process we're creating here is a sequential business process. And the way we can tell that is because we have a start and we have an end point. So that's the critical feature for the sequential business process. And on the right hand side here we can see all of the different action blocks that we can use to create our business process. So we've mentioned how it uses drag and drop technology, so we can simply select the action and we can then add it into here like so. So it's really simple to start creating your own actions inside the system. Okay, so what we're going to have here is actually a condition, because what we want to do is look at the stage of the deal. Okay, so first of all we're going to go into here, so we've got 3 conditions, so we're going to check 3 different stages here. So first of all we're going to give this a status, so the title we're going to give for this is the quote sent, because we're going to be looking for when the deal has been hit at the quote is sent stage. And we want to select that field type, so inside here what we're going to do is choose the stage, and we're going to choose inside here. So we can see here we've got all of our different types of pipelines, so we're going to choose the send quote in that particular pipeline, and we're going to save that there. And I'm just going to do the same now for these 2 other conditions, so we'll just select the different stages. If you do ever need any help with building out business processes, our team here at Interface, we can help you, so we can train you if you would want training on using the Business Process Designer tool. And we can also build workflows for you. If you send over the details of what the workflow is and what the process should be, we can build that for you on your system as well. Okay, so we'll just go into here and select stage. We've done that, and we're going to choose the job is now at the invoice stage. Okay, so there we've got our three different conditions. So where the quote is at the sent, once the quote has been approved, and when the deal is at the invoiced stage. And now what we're going to do, we're going to create different actions that we're going to add at these different branches here. So let's say, for example, at the quote is sent stage, let's say we're going to wait for a certain amount of time. Let's say we're going to wait 7 days. And then after that, we want to add a phone call for the responsible person. Okay, and then at the quote approval stage, if it's been approved, we might want to run a credit check. So it's really important we check that the credit check has been completed, so we can add that into the quote is approved stage. And at the invoice stage, let's notify the sales manager. And also let's thank the customer for their order. Okay, so what we can see here, those different action blocks that we have populated at each condition here. So when the deal is at the quote sent stage, we're running these specific actions. And then once the deal is updated, because we're running this process, every time the deal gets updated, we're checking again if the quote is at the approved stage. And if it is, we're running this particular credit check action. And it's the same then, we're checking when it's at the invoice stage. So we can see all of these different triggers that we're able to run using the Business Process Designer tool. Okay, so that's using the Business Process Designer tool. But what we can also do is run automations inside the deal directly using the CRM automation tool. So let's just go into our deals. And let's go into the automation section. Okay, so we mentioned earlier on how we can, and we saw how we could run automations inside leads. You can do the exact same inside your deals as well. So inside deals, you can create different pipelines. And what's really nice inside here is you can set up completely unique automation rules and stages for every single pipeline that you have inside your CRM system. So it's a really flexible tool, this here. And we have already mentioned here, so for example, we can set up different actions. So for example here, at the confirm requirement stage, we're sending out an email. At a certain step here, we're creating a task for a responsible person, and we've set up a deadline inside the system. And maybe once we've got to the send quote stage, we're actually changing who is responsible for that particular deal. So it could go to somebody else in a different department. So you can put that task directly on that person's desk to work on and process. Okay, so that's a look there at automation rules. So let's, for example, go into a deal. And then what we can do is we go through those different stages on the deal. We can see automations taking place. So we can go through those different stages. It's now created a task. So we need to get in contact with this particular deal. And we can also, within the task itself, we've got a deadline that's been automated. And we can start recording the amount of time that we're spending on that particular deal. So that's a really good example here of how we can run automations on our deals as well. Okay, so that's a look at how we can create a business process using the Business Process Designer tool, and also how we can run those automation rules directly inside the deal as we're progressing the deal through those customizable stages. Okay, so actually now we've seen how we can create a business process, and we briefly touched upon how we can actually trigger the business process, so how that business process actually gets initiated. Okay, so there are different ways that this can be done. So first of all, you can do this on creation. So for example, when you create a new deal inside your CRM system, if a deal gets created, then we could then trigger a business process to be run. Or it could also be on updates. So if an update is made on an existing deal, maybe you progress through to a new stage, then we could run and trigger that business process. Another way is manually triggering the process. So we saw when we went into Techco, one of our companies inside the CRM system, we manually created that particular process. And if we just now actually go back into one of our deals, I'll just show you again how you manually can run a process. So here in the corner we've got our workflow button, and I could then manually run a business process inside the system as well. Okay, so that's manually. So we're mentioning a CRM on documents, so we've got the state driven process there, or also in the stream area. So inside the stream, then what we can do is we can manually run a process, for example on a leave request. That's a very popular workflow in the Bitrix24 system. So inside the workflow section here, then what I might do is I could go into here and request leave. So I can go in and populate this field with information, and I can then send that to my manager to either approve or reject in the system. So that's manually running that process. Now just to mention, we will go through this leave request in more detail shortly. The information you can see on this particular form, that's completely customizable. So don't be concerned if you're thinking I don't need those particular fields, or if I want more information on that request leave form. You can completely customize that form with the required fields that you would want in the system. Okay, so let's look at manually triggering a process. And another way is actually using a webhook. So that could be inbound or outbound, but you could trigger a process either from an external source, for example, using the webhook. And with the self-hosted edition, it's possible to use the API and external triggers. So for example, if we go back into our system, this is a self-hosted system, so it's a more advanced solution. I can go into our settings section. And what we have here is, for example, a mailbox. And with the self-hosted solution, you can create more advanced processes. So for example, we could create a new rule inside a mailbox that we have integrated. So what we can then say is, if a particular email comes into this mailbox, we could then, for example, create a help desk ticket inside our help desk module. So that's the more advanced process that you could run on a self-hosted solution. So if you have any questions about the self-hosted system, how it could help you in managing more advanced processes, please do contact sales@intraface.com and we can set up a meeting with you, and we'll add our details at the end of today's webinar. So just to point out, with the self-hosted system, you can create more advanced processes. Okay, so a question has just come in: is the API available on the cloud system? So the REST API is available on the cloud edition. If you want access to the full API for complete integration, you would require a self-hosted edition. Okay, and just before we go through some live examples, just to mention again, if there are any questions, please do add them into the question box on the YouTube channel here, and we can run through those before the end of today's Better Business Processes webinar. Okay, so now we'll move on to look at several live examples of how we can see those processes really in a live action of the Bitrix24 system. So we'll see how we can create a new project, how we can manage a leave request in the system, and also how we can manage a new lead in the CRM. So we're using different areas of the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look at how we can create a new project inside the Bitrix system. Okay, so the way I'm going to show you how to create this process is I'm going to run this manually inside the feed section here. But as we've learned in today's webinar, it is possible to trigger a business process in lots of different ways. One of those is manually, as we'll look at here, but it could be that we trigger this process when a deal hits a specific stage. So if the deal is marked as 1, then actually we could run and create a project using the automation rules and the business process designer tool as well. Okay, so let's go into here and let's select the new project workflow. So what this will enable us to do is actually create a brand new work group in the task and project management module of Bitrix24. And we're going to be able to bring specific people and create specific tasks based on the type of project that we're going to select. So it could be in your business, you have different services, for example, and based on those different services, there are specific tasks that have to be completed. So you could create a process where, based on this type of service or project you select, that then triggers the creation of specific tasks and brings specific specialized people into a project group. So it takes out any of that real opportunity of any human error, and it can speed up the process to start working on those particular projects inside the system. Okay, so first of all, on this particular form, we're going to give this project a name. So we're coming up to February, so let's call this the February project. And I want to select a manager for this particular process, and we have the role of a designer, so I'm going to select the designer as well. Okay, so let's add a deadline, which is going to be the end of February. We could add a description if you want and a file. But what I'm now going to do is I'm going to select the type of project, and this is important because based on this selection, this will then decide who is going to be added to this project and what types of tasks are going to be created inside the project as well. So let's submit that. I've selected project A and we're going to submit that. Okay, so what has happened now is the project has come through to myself because I'm going to be assigned as the project owner. So I now have added this here and I need to add the completion date that I expect the project to be completed by. Okay, so I've added that and I'm going to add a comment as well. And now I could either approve or reject this particular project, but I'm happy to approve this. So let's click the approval button. Okay, so we've approved the project. Now if we go into our work group section where we store and manage all of our projects in the system, we can see the February project has actually created a work group in the system. And we can see in this work group that we have select members, and if we go into the task area, we can see this has automatically created a task inside the work group that we now need to start working on and starting to progress the project. So from adding that information, it's created a project group, it's brought specific people into the project, and it's created the tasks specific to the project type A that we need to work on. Okay, so let's now just look at this workflow in the back end of the Bitrix system where we have the actual process designer tool. Okay, so we'll go into the new project. Now this is the process designer tool in the back end from what we have just looked at when we submitted for that new project. So again, this is using a sequential business process because we have a start point and we have an end point. So to begin with, we filled in the form with the information that was required. And then what we did was we selected based on the type of project we wanted to run. So we selected project A. So that created that scoping task inside the project. But if we had selected project B, then that would have created a design task and a development task inside the system. So that selection process routed that process down a specific channel. So you can see how flexible and customizable you can be using the business process designer tool. Okay, and the second type of process we're going to run is a leave approval. So as another user here, let's go and request leave inside the system. So I'm filling in the form here, and again, the form that you have here, this is completely customizable. So you can decide what fields you would want to display in the form, and you can also decide what fields are mandatory inside the form as well. Okay, so now I'm going to submit that form inside the system. So that business process has now been triggered, and that was manually triggered in the system. And we've now come through here as the manager, and we can see that request has come through. So I can see all of the details about the request. If I wanted to, I could add a comment or maybe collaborate with Mark to get some more information. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to approve that request. Okay, so Mark has now been notified that the holiday has been approved. And we can come back into the time and reports area. And we can see, if we go into our absence chart, we can see that annual leave has been added into the system in the absence chart for us to use. Okay, and the third way, let's just see how we could actually create a new lead in the system. So there's quite a few ways you can create leads inside the system. And that could be, for example, through a live chat. So you could set up a live chat on your website, and that could then trigger the creation of a brand new lead in your system. But a really popular way is actually using website forms. So we'll just go and select a form inside the system. And there's no limit to the number of forms that you can create, and it's a really powerful tool. So you can see we have a lot of forms, so you can create forms for different entities in the system. And with a form, you can either create the form in Bitrix and embed that onto a Bitrix web page that you create in the Sites module, or you also get the embedding code. So you could actually embed this form onto your own website. And what we can then select is, based on the form being submitted, we can choose where we would want that information to go inside the CRM system. So for example, I could create a brand new lead inside the system. So let's add some details here. Okay, so I've added some details, and I'm going to submit that form. So it could be an inquiry form, for example. That's a really popular type of form. Okay, and now let's go back into the CRM. And we can see here now 6 seconds ago that from the adding of information on the form that we submitted, it has automatically now added all of that information into the CRM as a brand new lead. So it's created a new lead. And now we're using some of those other tools that we've mentioned in the webinar today. So we've got the automation processes. So as soon as the lead comes in at the new lead stage, which it has, we're automatically sending out a thank you email to the lead, and we're dynamically populating it in the system. And then what we could do is we could actually follow up and create a task for the responsible person, and we could set a deadline on that task, for example. And if we now just go back into that lead, we can see here that that email was sent out automatically to Matt, thanking them for their inquiry. So you can see how you can seamlessly really streamline your processes using the different tools inside Bitrix24. Okay, so now just to go through some of the differences between the cloud and the self-hosted. Most of the tools we've seen today are available in both the cloud and self-hosted solutions. They both include the editor tool and processes for documents, HR and CRM items. Really, I guess what I would say is the main difference and benefit of a self-hosted option is that you can run processes on extra modules. So it could be from the user profile, for example, or you also have the PHP code block in the business process designer tool. So it could be for some types of complex processes, you need to add the PHP code to create that business process. So really, for advanced processes, you should be looking at the self-hosted solution. And then we could also use the API to trigger processes to and from the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so in summary today, we've seen how we can, first of all, see the different types of business processes that we can run on Bitrix24. So we have the sequential business process, the state-driven process, and the automation tools in the CRM and robotic process automation. And we've seen how we can run processes in lots of areas, from the feed section to documents, the CRM entities, and on HR areas. And hopefully you've seen how simple it is to use the process designer tool using drag and drop technology. And we've seen how processes can be triggered in lots of different ways, from manually triggering to automatically based on maybe the update on a deal, and also using other rules such as if an email comes in or an API call for the self-hosted edition of Bitrix24. Okay, so coming soon, here are a selection of the webinars we've got coming up. So we're here at Tuesday at 11 AM Eastern Time every week. Next week's webinar is the self-hosted advantages. So if maybe you're keen to look at the self-hosted solution in more detail, then I really would recommend joining us next Tuesday, where we go into a lot more detail looking at the key features of the self-hosted system. If in the meantime, before next Tuesday, if you have any questions or if you would want to set up a call with us to discuss your Bitrix24 project or requirements, please do email sales@intraface.com and we'll be happy to set up a meeting with you. But thank you for your time today. Bye for now.